Hello everyone, my guest today is Joah Spearman. He's the founder of Localeur, a leading travel startup that shares local recommendations in more than 80 cities around the world. Joah has become one of the top global contributors on technology, diversity, and entrepreneurship related topics on LinkedIn. He has also written a book called Real Role Models, Successful African Americans Beyond Pop Culture. He co-founded the official style segments of both South by Southwest and ESPN X Games, as well as serving as a chairman of the board of directors for AIDS Services of Austin, the leading AIDS organization in Central Texas. So, Joah, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Thomas.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, I would love, you have done so much in your life. I would love to hear a little bit more about your backstory. So, tell us a little bit more about your journey of, becoming and coming where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about my journey, the person that I most think about is my mom, and she's just such a huge inspiration to me, such a huge motivating factor, just seeing the sacrifices that she made to raise my older brothers and I by herself, and working 2 and 3 jobs, and sacrificing her own pursuit of college degree early on to raise us and give us a model of grit and perseverance and patience, and just really just being responsible and playing the long game. And in a lot of ways, I get to benefit from standing on her shoulders and pursuing entrepreneurship and benefiting from a lot of the sacrifices that she made.
Yeah, so that's super interesting. I love that backstory. So you grew up in the US. So what was kind of like the move, before, like starting your first business and kind of like developing into, who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we grew up very poor, and, getting the free lunches at school was, a very important thing for me. And I didn't get to go to the best schools, but I definitely always valued school. And thankfully, along the way, there have just been various people that have made an impact on me. To this day, I'm still really good friends with my high school track coach, who, he's a history teacher and a cross country and track coach, but he's the kind of person who taught me a lot about consistency and having discipline. And I think, learning from people like him, people like my mom, it really put me in a position where I was able to look past the barriers that I had in my childhood, and past the shortcomings that I had, past the fact that we didn't have a lot of access to, the things that, I didn't grow up in the middle class or upper middle class existence or anything like that. So I think in a lot of ways, the things that drive me are part having come from not much and wanting to create more resources and more opportunity for myself. And I think the other part of it is wanting to kind of pay it back to the people who've helped me get where I am. So I really started my first business when I was, 11 years old. I didn't have a way to go on a field trip when I was in 5th grade, because the cost of the field trip was more than what my mom could afford. And so the next year I started cutting grass and raking leaves for my neighbors to save money. And then 2 years later of doing that, I was able to pay for a field trip to go to Washington, D.C. on my own, or with my class, rather, my 8th grade class. And that just taught me the value of not just of money, but of working hard, of kind of putting your head down and sticking to something, and also being able to kind of create something from scratch. Like I didn't own a lawnmower. I didn't have money, but I figured out a way to borrow someone's lawnmower, to go to my neighbors and kind of put myself out there and how to sell something. And those early entrepreneurship lessons, I think they just put the foundation in me in the sense of, by definition, entrepreneurship is the pursuit of resources beyond which you currently control. And, for me at 11, 12, 13 years old, I was kind of putting that in practice without even really knowing it was entrepreneurship. I just knew that I was trying to pursue something and give myself more opportunity. And, fast forward 15, 20 years, and here I am, 7 years into a technology startup, where in a lot of ways, I'm still doing a lot of the same types of things I was doing back then, but just at a much bigger scale.
Yeah, man, I love that backstory. That's incredible. Do you think there was, with the way of, or what were the key resources that you have used, along your way? So maybe when we were younger, but also right now. So what are some key resources that we're using back then and now?
Yeah, it's funny, yesterday I was meeting with a guy who he's new to Austin. He's trying to get into a certain industry, and I have some relationships in that industry. And so I was telling him, I was like, you know what, so much of what you want to get in life is just about showing up. It's amazing how many free resources are out there, free opportunities that people don't take up on because they look for some shortcuts or some silver bullet. And so much of it is just showing up. And I really learned that from watching my mom. And so in terms of early resources, I vividly remember when I was in 7th grade. This is in the mid 90s when the internet was starting to become a thing. American Online and Netscape and Lycos and all these early tech companies, pre-Google tech companies. And I remember at my school, they gave us access to the computers in the library. I didn't have a computer at home, and honestly, until I was a senior in high school, but I was able to use the free computers at school. And they had a program on the computer that allowed you to kind of do almost like a survey. And based on your answers to the survey, it would give you some suggestions as to types of careers that you should pursue. So I did this thing a couple of times, and I kept getting back businessman. So it was saying, you should become a business person. And at that same time, my mom got a job as an assistant for a man, actually an African-American man who owned his own business. And his business was owning a franchise of Pizza Huts in South Carolina. And so at the same time that I was meeting this black man for the first time who'd owned his own business, I was also reading about on this computer program at school that I should be a business person. So I think I just got enamored with this idea of pursuing business. And so I used that program to do more research, and it then showed me potential colleges that had good business programs, how you should go about building a career there. And that's really when I set on this course of, going to college. I ultimately became the first person in my family to graduate from college. And really seeing my mom work for this guy, this black man who himself went to college, owned his own business. It gave me this model of like being able to make it possible. It showed me that it wasn't too out of reach, and I think that it's really important for young people, especially, to have, even if they don't have a model like in their own house or in front of them, like, reading magazines, reading books, just getting examples of things that other people have done to just give you a sense of what's possible. And also to look beyond those people that you're reading about, to know that, hey, if they did something, then maybe it's possible for you to do something else that didn't exist before you did it either.
Yeah, got it. So he was kind of like a person, and you looked at him, like it's possible to do it. Do you have someone like this right now, where you have people, or a couple of different people, you look at them and say like, wow, like that's still motivating you to kind of like keep going every day?
Yeah, you know what? What's interesting is the older I get, it's not that I would say that I don't have as many role models or mentors as I did when I was younger. But the older I get, the more I realize that the motivating factor for me isn't actually in looking at what someone else has accomplished or what someone else is doing, but it's actually thinking more about what unique skills and experiences I've had and what the world needs that someone with my skills or experiences could create. So that's kind of how I created Localeur. I really felt like I had been traveling a lot, and whenever I was traveling, I was finding myself asking locals where they hang out, where they go. And so when I started this company, it was really just to put something into the world that I felt like was giving travelers that thing that I wanted too, which was to know where locals go. So the older I get, really, obviously, I'm inspired by people like Jay-Z or Oprah Winfrey and, all these people who've done amazing things. But to me, I look at them more as their symbols, more so than like bona fide mentors or role models to me. The older I get, the more I kind of look inward at what I'm capable of and what I think I can contribute to the world, and how I can get that out of myself and reach my own potential.
Yeah. So you just talked about a little bit about, your unique skills. Do you think there is a unique skill that has helped you to become successful, or that has helped you really, to accomplish a lot?
It's tough to qualify this as a skill, but what I would say is grit. I think that, almost all young people, I think at some point have a dream. And, when you're 5 years old, 10 years old, maybe even 15 years old, and as you're getting older, what happens is you start experiencing the world. And the more you start experiencing the world, the more you start realizing that the world, A, is not built for you. It's not catering to you. If you have a goal or ambition or dream, like, the world isn't going to kind of shape itself for you to make that possible. You have to shape the world around you to make that possible. And so, as I've grown older, I've seen, good friends of mine kind of give up on their dreams when they were, 20 years old in college, or maybe 5 years out of college, or maybe 10 years out of college. And I think in a lot of ways it's because, the more that maybe they pursued it, the harder it got. And at some point they kind of decided that that wasn't something that they wanted to kind of toil through. And for me, I've really gritted through a lot, even being an African-American entrepreneur and trying to raise capital for a technology startup is very, very infrequent, that it happens. I'm one of, that I know of, less than 20 African-Americans that have raised $5 million for a tech startup, and obviously trillions of dollars go to tech startups each, every few years or so. So, it hasn't been an easy road. I've had to kind of persevere through a lot of adversity. But I think that the thing that's pushed me through that is having that grit and the ability to, deal with certain times of uncertainty and still kind of stay focused and keep my head down and try to stay positive and optimistic about the outcomes.
Yeah, I love that. So, you have done so much in the last couple of years. I mean, for example, if I look at your LinkedIn profile, like, you have so many experience in there. What do you wish you had known, kind of like when you started out? Maybe like when you started, your first serious business or your first actual business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my first real business really was a sneaker boutique that I opened in Austin, Texas. That failed after a little over a year. And something that I wish I had known then that I know now is that it's really important to, you really have to be solving for a problem. And even if things come along when you're running a business where it seems like it's attractive and sexy to go pursue X, Y, and Z. And you have to pass up a lot of opportunities that don't actually solve the problem that you care about. Because, when I had my sneaker boutique, the problem that I wanted to solve was that I felt like so much of retail is rooted in trying to get people to come to you. If you have a brick and mortar store, you're trying to encourage customers to come to your store and all this. And so I created the business model with the idea of creating these pop-up boutiques where I would pop up with my sneakers at different, hip hop concerts, festivals, et cetera, and sell things there. And it worked really well. Where my business went south was when I then ultimately ended up opening a brick and mortar location. And I went back into the traditional business model of like, oh, you have to come to my shop and buy things here. And I opened the brick and mortar shop because it was a really sexy thing to do. It was really cool to say that I had this place, but it actually didn't solve the problem that I was trying to solve, which is like bringing sneaker culture to people where they were. So that's one of the lessons that I've learned that I've tried to just apply, moving forward and throughout all of the business I've done.
Got it. No, that's really interesting. I think it's also really important, and sometimes you kind of like forget it down the road in your like day-to-day business.
Yeah, totally. Especially because I have a lot of people come to me. I give a lot of talks at universities and colleges, and people come to me and they say, "Oh, I have an idea for an app," and and it's like, no, that's not a good place to start. No one cares about your idea for an app. People care about like tell me about the problem you're trying to solve. Don't tell me about the idea for an app. Tell me about, I have this problem is important to me and I want to solve it. And the app is one of the ways that we can solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. What drives you most right now? Kind of like to wake up every day and hustle every day. What drives you the most there?
I'm really passionate about helping creative people. So much of what I've done with Localeur is I've built this global community across the 120 plus cities around the world of mostly creatives. These are writers, these are designers, they're photographers, they're DJs, whatever. Most of them are creative professionals. And Localeur has become another way for them to express themselves, to share their point of view, to talk about their cities, to share their sense of place. I'm really passionate about helping creatives, and you know, I have a girlfriend who's a musician, and I manage her. Have a lot of friends who are artists and designers, and I try to support them every way possible. I think that when you unlock creativity, that's actually the beginning of a cycle that can ultimately become a business. I think too often nowadays people start a business to make money. And I think that actually the real purposes of a business, I think, is to share something in the world that doesn't exist and to solve a problem. And I think so much now, so there's so much optimization and iteration happening and not a lot of innovation, because I think that people are trying to build creative solutions without actually doing it with the creatives. And I think tech itself is one of those industries where, you know, we've seen in a lot of ways, tech has kind of become like Wall Street or like the finance industry, where there's a lot of optimization around, you know, valuations and fundraising round sizes and all these things. And then, you know, years later, people look at these businesses and they don't have the type of connection to community or authenticity or social good that they should have had, because they were taking shortcuts along the way because they were optimizing for the financial outcomes instead of optimizing for solving a problem or supporting the creative idea.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on that. And I think in my opinion, it actually doesn't work to build a business for, you know, the sake of making money. I think it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I was recently, you know, that group of CEOs of large companies came out and said that making profits wasn't the only purpose of a business. And that's a great step, but you know, it's easier to say it than do it. And I think that I'm eager to see these big kind of Fortune 100 company CEOs, global, you know, company CEOs kind of get behind that and actually start taking the steps that you know, to put that into their businesses. So they're not so much focused on quarterly earnings as they are on, you know, being good employers, being good stewards of the environment, of their contract with their customers and their employees and whatnot. Yeah,
no, I totally agree with you. So Joe, just to wrap this up here, what's next for you? I mean, you know, you've done so much. What are the next steps? Kind of if we look, you know, like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years into the future, what can we expect?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm actually actively working on a book right now. The book is in a lot of ways about grit. It's about problem solving. It's about a lot of the experiences that I've had, you know, being an entrepreneur. So that's a book that I've been working on this year, and you know, I think it'll probably come out in 2021. So that's something to look forward to. And then also, you know, Localeur is getting to a point where we have a global reach, and now we're having some really interesting conversations with you know, whether that be big companies in the travel space or big companies in the tech space. And I think my guess is sometime in the near future, we're going to unlock some really high scale partnership potential where we can really democratize what we've learned, which is how to build community around local and how to share and build authentic quality content at scale, and really partner with either a large tech company or a large travel company to democratize our content and our community in a way where, you know, if you're using a search engine, you can easily access Localeur content, or you're on a map on your phone, you can easily access that content. So I think that we've been really focused on building our own community, building our own content mechanism. And I think at this point now we're large enough to do like a really large strategic partnership and unlock all the value that we've created and put it into the hands of millions and millions of people around the world.
Great. I love that. So is there anything you would like to share with the audience, or anything that you kind of like would give them a tip or advice or whatever?
You know, a lot of people, you know, they have seen the movies or they've read the articles, seen the magazines about entrepreneurs. And as a result, I think a lot of young people, especially, they want to become entrepreneurs. And I think that's a great initiative. I think starting a business is a great thing for people to do. But what I would say is, I really think that it's important that people also, they learn before they pursue something. And so a lot of the advice that I give to young people and entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs, is get paid to learn first. You know, like I didn't really know the technology industry that much. So what I did is actually I went and got a job at a company in Austin, a fast growing tech company in Austin at the time. And I worked for that company with a partial intent to learn as much as I can about the industry and about how these companies operate so that I could do it myself one day. And I think that experience was just so instrumental for me doing this, what I do today, and doing it fairly well. And I think it's really important that people don't feel like they have to take this shortcut because, you know, there's this 20 under 20 list or 30 under 30 or 40, and they feel like they have to attach their success to an age or how fast they got it done. It's not about speed, it's about completion. And so I think it's really important that you learn along the way so that you can get it done, as opposed to, you know, trying to take shortcuts so that you can say you're doing it.
Got it. I love that. So thank you so much for being on the show.